Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. If you're new here, my name is Christina. This is a reading for Capricorn sun signs, or if you have significant Capricorn in your chart and are needing a masculine energy to work with or balance within yourself, then this reading is for you. So Capricorn, I tried to do your reading yesterday, but the energy was very, very heavy. I don't know, I feel like it was a combination of your energy, but also my guides telling me to wait a day in order to deliver this message for various reasons. So I have your reading. We're using different decks than what I used yesterday. And the message today feels a bit more clear. So I feel like it's a more aligned message. So we're going to start off with these cards here. And what's really interesting is that they're all Pentacles and Cups. So I feel like your energy is this, the Queen of Cups, the 8 and 7 of Pentacles. So I feel like Capricorn, you're really focused on your work or your abundance, right? Like, or a very pentacle aspect. It doesn't have to be like work, but usually that's sort of how it plays out. So you're very focused on perhaps like your physical environment, but because you're coming out with this Queen of Cups, it's really interesting because I feel like you have found some level of like emotional satisfaction within that, right? Like it's like you feel content is kind of how it's feeling. However, there is something here that is suggesting maybe there's like perhaps a contentment within what it is that you're doing, like your work, how you make money, that kind of thing. But perhaps there's like other aspects of your life that are perhaps not moving forward in the way that you would like, because I feel like what's really interesting about this 8 of Pentacles, because it's like this man painting a portrait and there's like a naked lady in the background. It's almost like you're not even considering anything outside of, or it's like because you're so focused on your pentacles, right? The things that you're working with, your resources. It's kind of like you're not seeing perhaps some sort of like outside energy perhaps that may be trying to get your attention is kind of how this is feeling, especially with these cards coming out, because you have the King of Cups, right? So you being the Queen, there's the King of Cups, Page of Cups, Knight of Cups. So all of the actors, I want to say, for the Cups element came out, right? The Queen of Cups, which is you. But then there's almost like this whole family of cups here, like trying to get your attention is kind of how this is feeling. But then you have here the 9 of Pentacles, which is kind of this is very much giving me sort of like a Marilyn Monroe vibe, right? Like it's like found a lot of success perhaps in her career. However, if you like go deeper into her story, like there was a lot of sort of difficulty there in her life, right? So I feel like there's something like that. If this message is not resonating for you, then you can leave it. It's not an easy message to hear, but this is what's coming through. So I'm just gonna keep going with it. You decide if it's for you or not. And then what these two interesting cards. So you have Portal for the Time Loop, which is talking about an energy that you have seen before. That this is perhaps a repeating pattern for you, Capricorn, where it's like, if you're perhaps in sort of a difficult place emotionally, I feel like there's a tendency to sort of focus on your work, right? Which is not a bad thing, because it's like you have gotten a lot of success. But what's interesting is that in the rest of the reading, there's absolutely no pentacle cards at all, right? It's like the only pentacles that have come out are in the context in the bottom of the deck, which is talking about you're at this place now. It's kind of time to focus on the other aspects of your life is kind of how this is feeling. Because what's interesting here is that the next portal card out is Portal for the Heartbroken. It's so interesting because this card has come out before and I've always been looking at it like this. Because some of the cards like flip upside down really easily, and there's not like some of the cards don't have like a really clear up-down orientation, so I get confused about which way the deck's supposed to go. Anyways, so this card I've always been seeing like this, and I was like, why why did the artist choose to depict it like this? Because to me, this looks like a like a roast chicken. I have no idea. I have no idea why I'm being prompted to say this, but it's kind of like today I turned it around. I turned it upside down, and you can clearly see there's two figures here being split apart, right? Which makes more sense with the heartbroken sort of theme. So what this is talking about, because I feel like this is actually, rather than it being sort of like a heartbreak, kind of like romantic relationship, that kind of thing, it's more so talking about like some sort of heartbreak. If you think of like Marilyn Monroe, right? She had a very difficult life up until the point that she became successful in her career. And of course, a bit of a tragic ending as well. But it's kind of like what this heartbreak card is talking about is that because it's coming out with the time loop, it's like, I feel like this is something where it's kind of like you're going to be seeing some aspect of this heartbreak energy from your past, I want to say, right? Something that you've seen before that you just keep coming up against this, like, perhaps like a barrier or something. And it's like, this is finally being revealed to you as the cause of it, of why it is that you perhaps have been hitting a wall in some other aspect of your life. And we're going to go through what that energy is. And it's, so just keep that in mind. That's sort of the overall context, the thing that's being brought to your attention. So here you're starting off with the Hunter, which has a lot in it. There's a lot of, I feel like for you, it's bringing Sagittarius energy. So if you have any Sagittarius in your chart, I feel like there's also a lot of Sagittarian energy in your reading today. So that could be something to keep in mind. You may have Sagittarius somewhere in your chart. Because this is a sun reading, I'm going to also probably link the Sagittarius moon reading at the end of this. If you're interested, may have messages in there for you. But then what you have here is the Judge and the Offering. So this Judge card is really interesting because whenever I see the Hunter, this talks about like your drive or direction forward, right? Like you have a goal, you have something that you're trying to achieve and going towards it. But because the Judge is coming out right next to it, it's feeling like a stop, right? Like very much a stop. But then if you look at this hand here, it's beckoning. There's something about, there's an energy here that is being represented as the Judge, which is kind of like something that you want to go towards, but you're stopping yourself. Is kind of how I'm reading this. It's like you want it, but you don't. You want it, but there's a blockage. You're not going there because with this Offering card, right? This is the thing that's beckoning you. It feels like something that is perhaps being given to you so that you can go towards. But I sometimes see this hand as being empty, and perhaps that's why you're not moving towards it, because it's like there's a fear there of like, what if that hand is empty, right? What if there's nothing on what if I go towards this thing, I leave my stable job, and it's like there's nothing there for me, right? Then I've lost all of this sort of wealth that I've accumulated. It could be something like that, for example. And it's kind of like this, what this is being represented by. You have here the Ace of Cups, which is like, this is the hand that's offering the potential for, I just heard everlasting life, but it might not be that, but overflow of energy. And again, it's more cups, because I feel like, especially as sort of like an earth sign Capricorn, water is the opposite to your energy, right? So it feels like you're very sort of stable in your pentacles, meaning like your resources, your physical abundance perhaps, but it's like there's something here where it's like your emotional self, perhaps your emotional resources, let's call it, are perhaps needing a refill, is kind of how this is feeling. And it's like the thing that's calling you towards it is being represented by this. 7 of Wands, 7 of Cups, 7 of Swords. three sevens. All three of these cards came out in a row, like together as a group. meaning that, like, I feel like there's, whatever this offering is, you will absolutely know what this is. I have no idea what it is for you. But it's like, it's coming out with 3 sevens, meaning it has a lot of synchronicity. I feel like it has something to do with, like, your inner truth, right? Because sevens talk all about like your, like, perhaps divinity, right? Like something that's very spiritually aligned, something that is part of your soul path, that kind of thing. But all of these 7 energies are very difficult. And you do also have the 7 of Pentacles as well, right? This is probably the most comfortable 7 energy for you, because it's like you're focusing on accumulating your physical abundance is kind of how this is feeling. But it's like, whatever this offering is, this potential path that you can travel on, it's coming in with like confusion, something that you're trying to hold back from, because it's like there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of confusion perhaps, or a lot of potential kind of missteps perhaps that are possible if you were to go down this path, especially. And it's like you're extremely comfortable here is kind of how it's feeling. And it's the portal cards to come out with it. Like, first of all, you have this card, the myth of the fractal tree, which to me always talks about like so much possibility, right? So much infinite possibility. It feels like you're kind of like, there's a lot of potential paths in which you can take, is kind of how this is feeling. But it feels like in your energy right now, it feels like you haven't made a decision, or you're choosing to sort of stay where you are, is kind of how this is feeling, because perhaps this choice, this offering, this new direction feels very much like the mountain, which is today talking about like it's like trying to climb Mount Everest. It would take training. It would take a lot of effort. It's potentially dangerous. It's like a big, not obstacle, but commitment, perhaps. Like it's an entire, like, you would have to train, or you would have to like prepare yourself. There would be a lot of sort of you also can't take you can't take a whole bunch of money bags with you, is kind of how this is feeling, right? There's a lot of things that you would have to potentially leave behind in order for you to go towards this thing. And that's why it's kind of, you haven't done it yet, right? That's it's kind of what this is saying. And then you have here the portal for the forgotten, which I feel like is this heartbreak energy, whatever this is. It's some sort of splitting. I'm seeing this as almost being like, because the other cards that come out here, you have here the Knight of Swords. So because of the Hunter, right? So this came out under the Ace of Pentacles, the Ace of Cups. The Ace of Cups. Perhaps there's something there about, like, there's a mixing of cups and pentacles. So perhaps putting a lot of focus on your physical resources, or what's surrounding you, your achievements, your physical abundance, that kind of thing. But I feel like what you're needing actually is this, like, Ace of Cups, right? It's just feeling like an overflow of emotional energy, whatever that means. Because I feel like where it is, perhaps anyways, it doesn't matter. But what's interesting here is that with the horse colors, right? This one's black, this one's white. And so together they would make the Chariot. I feel like right now you're almost like in this energy, to like a lot of sort of forward momentum, because the Knight of Swords is the one that moves very quickly, right? With the truth, absolutely, or with a message, or like with purpose, I want to say, like, you're moving forward. But I feel like you've perhaps almost like become detached from this aspect of yourself, the Hunter, which is coming in with the black horse, which is kind of like something like perhaps like a shadow aspect, because it's coming through with the heartbroken card, right? 2 aspects of self perhaps that have become detached. And I've been watching the OA. I actually finished it yesterday. The OA, it's an old show on Netflix. But in the second season, so it's Should I explain the whole thing? I'll try not to give spoilers, but it is an old show, so if you haven't watched it yet, that's fine. So it's a really trippy show. It's really trippy. It's kind of, there's this main character. Her name's Prairie, and she gets kidnapped by somebody. She's born. Oh my gosh, I have to explain the whole thing if this is gonna make any sense. So there's a character named Prairie. She was actually born in Russia. Her name was Nina when she was in Russia. And she went through a near-death experience when she was a child, right? So that's the heartbroken energy. From that point on, after this car crash, she became separated from her father. She was very young. She got adopted by this family in America, who actually sort of stifled her natural ability to connect with spirit, that kind of thing. It's like she had dreams and all of that, that were sort of premonitions, but they medicated her, right? So that to prevent her from sort of interacting with this natural aspect of herself. But because that show's all about like sort of jumping through different dimensions and all that, she jumps into a different dimension later on in the story where she jumps into another person's life. It's still her, right? Physically, it's still her body. It's her life, but it's her life if she had never been in that bus crash. Because that was sort of that pivotal heartbreak moment that caused her to become separated from herself, right? So in that story, she enters, or like she jumps into the life of herself if she had never been in that bus crash. And so that person, that other version of herself, lived a more sort of happier existence. She had more time with her father. She had all of this abundance. She had always been connected with, had never been separated from this aspect of self where it's like she was an accepted, like, sort of like medium is kind of how I'll put it. She was a medium. She had abundance from her sort of like spiritual self, that kind of thing. So it's kind of like she was able to see, because she jumped into that other version of herself, how her life would have played out if she had never encountered that first heartbreak energy. And I feel like that's what this is talking about, your reading, because it's kind of like, I feel like for you, Capricorn, there's this moment here in your past, perhaps, where it was like these two aspects of yourself became separated. Your ability to take action and move forward, and also the drive, or the perhaps like pure nature aspect of yourself that like wants things or wants to go towards things. Like these two aspects have become separated for some reason. And because of this sort of separation of self, there's this, you're coming out with the Four of Cups here, which is talking about, it's like, this is, I'm seeing this just as being like burnout, right? It's like you could be just feeling burnt out because you've been putting so much effort into working on whatever, your abundance, but it's kind of like it takes all of your energy because you've become detached from this aspect, which is sort of like your natural kind of fuel, perhaps, like your natural fuel, your natural drive, that kind of thing. Not that this is artificial in any way, because for the Chariot, you need both, right? You need both the white horse and the black horse, whatever that means metaphorically for you. The shadow and the light aspects, if you want to call it that. You need both. And it's like this one here, or like this energy here is kind of like, this is you trying to manifest or build things or whatever it is, only using this aspect of yourself, only using the light aspect of yourself, instead of, and not incorporating this sort of, perhaps the shadow aspects, but it doesn't, it's like the version of yourself that never went through difficulty and heartache is kind of how I'm feeling this shadow. It's something like, this is the other version of you that never encountered whatever that initial heartbreak energy is. And I feel like for you, Capricorn. I almost said Sagittarius again. There's a lot of Sagittarius energy in your reading. It's kind of like, because the next few cards to come out are this like Justice and the Strength. So if you look at this Justice card, it's like, this is like this gate, because I sometimes see this Hunter card with the horse as almost being like stuck in a gate, or like in the gate about to like be let out of the gate, if that makes sense. All of this fire behind her, right? It's kind of like a natural, perhaps like passion or drive to move towards something. But with the Strength card coming out next, and these cards coming out with the Knight of Pentacles being a black horse, right? This is the slowest moving deck or the slowest moving card in the deck, where it's kind of like there's perhaps been an aspect where you've held back, right? With the Strength card, some aspect of your natural, perhaps drive or forward momentum or something like that. And it's coming out next with the Five of Swords, which is talking about like a lose-lose situation, but it kind of feels like within self, right? Like your one aspect of yourself is purposely taking the swords or the power away from this other aspect of self because of some mindset, perhaps, of like it's like this aspect of yourself is somehow like not allowed to be free. I don't know if that's the best way to phrase it. It's taking the power away from this aspect of self, perhaps a shadow aspect. It doesn't have to, I don't want to use the word light and shadow because that has too much like, I feel like that has too much judgment. It has too much judgment on it. There's too much like feeling of this is good, this aspect of self is good, this aspect of self is bad. And so I'm going to separate those two aspects. I'm not going to look at the bad aspects of myself, right? Or the negative or the shameful or the whatever sort of negative label you want to put on this, right? So it's like you've detached from some aspect of this self, perhaps, right? And the two cards that you have next are these two. The Hanged Man twice. The Hanged Man, to clarify the Hanged Man, which I want to emphasize here. The Hanged Man is an energy of pause, absolutely, but it's one that is self-imposed, right? This Hanged Man implies that you put yourself in this position in order to get a new perspective, right? So it could be something like in the past, right? Let's say you, in that story for the OA, she was essentially orphaned. She was adopted by this family that absolutely took care of her, right? Provided a life for her that was much easier than where it was that she was coming from. However, they also medicated her because they didn't understand her perspectives. They didn't understand her gifts, her natural ability, perhaps. There was a dampening, right? So so that's a heartbreak energy for sure. Where it's kind of like some aspect of herself was forgotten. Some aspect of her spiritual self, perhaps, was forgotten. And then with this Hanged Man, it's kind of like perhaps that in order to survive that environment, right? Because every person has a natural ability to sort of survive in difficulty. Absolutely. So in order to survive that environment, she had these perhaps habits or things that like how do I phrase this? With the Knight of Pentacles, perhaps slowed down some aspect of her natural ability in order for the environment to, like, it's like, because you can't run before walking, right? It's this energy. This is a very sort of slow and steady, working on abundance, long-term sort of commitments, building trust, building resources is how I see the Knight of Pentacles typically. But the Hunter is absolutely much more fast moving, right? There's more of a freedom, because this to me talks about routine. So it could be something about like routine and freedom, or like, I don't know, but what I feel like for you, there may be this moment here with the Hanged Man, and especially because I was seeing this as like flipping something upside down, because before I was seeing it as a roast chicken, but it's more so it's like wanting you to reframe, especially with the Hanged Man, reframe some aspect of self, perhaps, because there's also this thing that's coming up from that show, where it's like, in order for her to solve the next challenge, she had to integrate both of those aspects of like herself that went through difficulty, who went through that crash, who went through losing her father, that kind of thing, and then the aspect of self who had a much more sort of abundant and happy life, because there are strengths on both sides, is kind of how this is feeling. The one who went through struggle and difficulty became stronger because of that. She was able to withstand a shit ton of difficulty, right? Like, she went through it, basically, but because of that was absolutely resilient and strong in all of this. But the other version of herself, the one that didn't go through difficulty, also knew what it was to be happy, right? To find purpose, to have like this like sort of confidence and ease in terms of how she connected with her spirituality and all of that. So there's this aspect here of like bringing those two aspects of self together, the one that didn't go through difficulty and the one that did, because both of those two aspects, right, the shadow self and the light self, if you want to call it that, have positive aspects, right? There's a connection between those two that is needing to be made in order for this next challenge, let's say, to be overcome. And with this, you have here the Nine of Cups. The Nine of Cups, which is so interesting because it's kind of like you have the Nine of Cups and the Nine of Pentacles. I feel like this is what it's like. What I'm feeling in this reading is that you're very much in sort of this Pentacles energy, right? It's like Marilyn Monroe. She was absolutely an icon, but it's kind of like, I feel like, this is just my interpretation of this, that there was a lot of sort of detachment in terms of like nobody was able to get close to her because she had created this iconic self, is kind of how I'm seeing this. Whereas this Nine of Cups, again, it's more so wanting to bring together the pentacle and the cup aspect. So emotions and resources, let's say. Something about fulfillment in terms of those two aspects. There's a splitting there that is wanting to come back together. And I feel like with the Nine of Cups, it's like much more relaxed, right? Much more accessible, much more familiar, entirely content with yourself is kind of how this is feeling. And it's also like much more casual as well, is kind of how this is feeling. I don't know, but perhaps it's just talking about like maybe you just work at a job that like you're always having to put on some sort of appearance or decor or like performance, perhaps, is kind of how it's coming through. But it's like there's a way in which with the Nine of Cups, perhaps needing to integrate some aspect of like your emotional self in that area. I don't know. And then here you have here the Six of Swords and the Knight of Swords again. So it's kind of like, I feel like it may even just be telling you to take a day off and just do something fun and not at all related to work, right? This Nine of Cups, just do something that like brings you joy, that fills your cup, that kind of energy. And then here with the Six of Swords, because that talks about forward momentum, and it's like it's emphasizing that what you're doing, the direction in which you're going is absolutely right, but it's kind of like bring in this aspect, right? The black horse aspect of yourself in order to move forward with more vigor or with more kind of like peace within your mind space, even though I feel like you're not really, because all of the cards here in this part of the reading are cups and swords, or cups and major arcana and the Knight of Swords, which is interesting. So it feels kind of like with the Five of Swords moving into the Six of Swords, something like, just like, this is a long reading, sorry. Finding more peace with giving yourself time off, maybe, or doing things that are fun instead of just like doing things that are good for your work life, that kind of thing, maybe. It's just trying to bring together aspects of self that have perhaps become separated because of a heartbreaking energy, or like energies from your environment that have perhaps tried to dampen your natural spirit or your natural gifts or whatever it is. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to leave it there, Capricorn. It's a really long message, and I feel like I was like really shouting at you there. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Going to move to the extended. We're going to talk about what's something else that you can focus on in this situation. The link for that is in the description box below. If this message resonated with you, please consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment down below. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I will see you in the next one. Have a great day.